But I want to stay on this issue of China because there's been a lot going on in Australia and around the world. And let's cross to Canberra again and catch up with Michael Shoebridge, who's the Director of Defence and Strategy at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks for joining us again, Michael. I want to ask you, I know we've spoken before, but seeing as we were there today and there's a bit of a big focus on the Premier actually speaking at the opening, your view of the role of this Chinese consulate compound in suburban Adelaide?
Well, Chris, I think it was a mistake for the Premier to turn up at the event. He didn't need to, and if he didn't need to, then maybe he shouldn't have. That consulate just seems to be too big for the actual purpose it's meant to have, which is serving the consular needs of Chinese nationals there. But it seems about the right size to be part of intimidating the Chinese diaspora, including the Uighur population. There's quite a big Uighur population down in Adelaide. And it also seems ideally placed to try and get hold of defence classified technology and secrets around things like our submarines, our ships, and our science and technology organisation, which has a big facility down there. So for lots of reasons, I think it's a mistake to celebrate that consulate.
Yeah, well, just to clarify, the official opening is still some 11 days away, and Stephen Marshall says he will go there and deliver a keynote address. Are you suggesting it would be wise for him to change his mind?
I do. I think it's wholly discretionary, and I think a Premier not being there would be situation normal. So why do it? What is the upside here?
Yeah, well, I suppose as we heard from him today, he talks about the economic relationship and he doesn't want to offend anybody. Well, this is a country that's already targeting us with economic sanctions. So, I mean, it's a bit like the old Monty Python scene. I mean, how much worse could it get? Jehovah, Jehovah, Jehovah.
Well, you've got to wonder, is he paying attention to what's going on federally? Does that federal legislation to tighten the power that the federal government has through its foreign affairs power in the Constitution over state governments for exactly this kind of purpose, with premiers off on their own frolics thinking they can build an international trade relationship with Beijing that's in contrast to the Canberra-Beijing relationship. That's a fundamental mistake, and he's not the only premier that's been making it.
Well, let's talk about the big strategic contest that is behind all of this, and that is China versus the US. Senior diplomats have been meeting in Alaska between the US and China, and apparently it all ended pretty sourly. Can you give us an update on what occurred there?
Yes, this is fascinating. A lot of shouting and stomping. I think a bit more calmness from the US side, but a lot of heat, light and energy from the two Chinese diplomats. The problem with this meeting is that the two Chinese diplomats don't really wield a lot of power back in Beijing, but they broadcast this wolf warrior attitude that Xi seems so fond of. So they're really performing for Xi rather than engaging with the US. And that's a real problem because Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is a powerful, influential figure in the US administration, so he can make things happen. But the two Chinese diplomats are mainly just voices. And so that's a fundamental mismatch. But there was a lot of black comedy in this meeting for such a serious thing. The two Chinese diplomats spent their time first talking about themselves and then talking about various weaknesses they perceive in the US and US domestic problems, and then leapt straight to saying how the US and its partners had no right to talk about anything inside China after doing exactly the opposite themselves with the US. Fascinating meeting.
Yeah. Strange times. I look forward to the Joe Biden-Xi Jinping summit at some stage.
Yeah, I think really the US brought multilateralism into the room, so Australian interests were in the room, and China brought itself and its wolf warrior behaviour. So that was the contrast.
Very concerning. Great to talk to you as ever, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Chris.